So thank you all for coming out today to stand strong against the privatization. We know there's been one series of outrages after another with this. The biggest, of course, being the efforts of NYCHA and the various corporate interests, the big banks, Columbia University, to engage in a large-scale land grab here, to grab what is now prime real estate here in Manhattanville, to gobble this up and to convert it into luxury development or a new dorm or this 26-story luxury tower, all this. This is part of the ongoing gentrification of Harlem and displacement of people. And it's being done right here under the name of the PACT program, which is basically a bait and switch, where NYCHA dangles in front of people the promises of some repairs, a nice new marble countertop or granite countertop, a fancy new stainless steel stove, gets people to sign on the dotted line, move out, and then never come back. Because once you leave, you will not come back in the vast majority of cases. When they privatize, on average, 9 out of 10 people do not get to return. The current head of NYCHA, Greg Russ, he used to run the Chicago Housing Authority. They've privatized all the projects there, basically. Now 30,000 people who used to live in housing have not been able to return to their homes. They've been waiting for 22 years. That's right, their temporary relocation lasted 22 years. So when NYCHA tells you they have this great new plan, you move out just for a little while, things get fixed up, then you come back. Ask them, what happened in Chicago? What happened in Boston? What happened in Minneapolis? What happened in San Francisco, California? San Francisco, by the way, was one of the first cities in this country to get rid of public housing, to convert it and replace it. And it's not a coincidence that that's the city in this country with one of the worst homelessness crises going on. Because when you get rid of housing and force everyone to go market rate, or some people to go Section 8, it drives up the rents across the board. And a lot of people get lost in the mix. So in Chicago, one of the big projects, it's not even housing anymore. The land was promised to residents. They said there'd be a one-for-one replacement, just like they're telling people here in Manhattanville and so many other NYCHA developments. But guess what they built instead of housing there? A new practice facility for the Chicago Major League Soccer team. They just signed a big long-term lease on that land.
Put the people out.
Put the people out. So we see what's happening all around Manhattanville. You got this 26-story luxury tower they're building here. Down on 125th Street, you see all these new fancy buildings going up.
Yep.
Right across Broadway, you've got Columbia's new Manhattanville campus. So we can see the projects being encircled by these developments. These new luxury towers, dorm rooms, campus buildings, etc. The writing's on the wall. So don't believe a word NYCHA says when they promise you all this and that. What's more, we've seen a series of outrages in the last few weeks even. This parking lot no longer being usable by residents. We already have a major parking shortage in the city. I live up in Inwood. You know what it costs there a month to get a parking spot? And not a nice one in a garage, crammed full of cars. About $400 a month for one parking spot. So people can't park here where they're gonna park their car. And then we saw just this past week, in 1470, NYCHA took away the keys to the tenant patrol room. That's one of the few community spaces where the kids can go in, play board games, do recreational activities, etc. So they're making it clear. Look, they've already fenced off the playground here. They've already fenced off a bunch of the green spaces. Now they locked that tenant patrol room. And Kenny and them, they fought for years.
One they locked off. Everybody else got their own, got their tenant patrol.
Oh, it's targeted. It's targeted, believe me.
Yes.
Because Kenny and others made their voices known against privatization, helped us to organize the protest where we went downtown to oppose Eric Adams and his role in privatization. So NYCHA knows what they're doing. In fact, earlier on in 1470, we were going to have a meeting there in the tenant patrol room to inform residents of the dangers of privatization. which is stipulated in HUD's regulations that tenants are allowed to use community rooms to organize for the betterment of the community, to improve their living conditions, etc. Well, NYCHA called up Kenny, and he actually called up people in other tenant patrol rooms, and NYCHA told them you can't use the room, and if you even take one chair out to have people use it for a meeting outside, we'll lock the room up.
Wow.
So we made use of those benches right there for that meeting. But it's clear, NYCHA does not want tenants to exercise their rights, to be organized, to get informed, to know what's going on, and to stand against it. Because the whole phony thing with this revitalization, they're calling it, this renovation, this gentrification scam that is packed, the whole thing is that they're claiming it's a democratic process because they hold a few meetings here. Well, I went to one of those meetings, maybe some of y'all did too, right in this gymnasium. And just about every single person in that room, 90 or so people, made their voices heard, yelling and cheering and clapping against PACT. And NYCHA said, after they were asked directly and repeatedly, well, actually, tenants don't have a say in whether you get PACT or not. We decide that. NYCHA decides that. Their bureaucracy decides that behind closed doors with their board of public-private partnerships, which is run by the banks. Yep. And all tenants get to choose is, do you want Slumlord A or Slumlord B to take over for the next few years before this project is flipped to Columbia? Some choice. Some choice indeed. Now at Harlem River Houses, just up the way on 151st Street, right across the river from Yankee Stadium, they've already been privatized. They were promised renovations, they were promised a brand new everything. But one of the tenants, who's part of United Front Against Displacement, she got the so-called new stove. It was not a new stove, it was her neighbor's stove. She was there cooking dinner, and her granddaughter was there. She turned on the flame, shot out, almost burned her granddaughter's face off. That was the new stove they brought in. Just the other day, she had a reporter go as part of our effort to test her water in her apartment for lead. Guess what? It's full of lead. NYCHA was supposed to fix that before privatizing. They haven't fixed anything. The most they do is paint over it.
I got pictures.
Come on up here, ma'am. You want to speak on the mic? I'll bring it to you, yeah.
I got pictures to show that NYCHA hasn't fixed anything. They want to paint over it, and that's not good. I have rust falling from the bathroom. And they just say, oh, we're gonna fix that. They wanna paint over it. And I told them, that's not fixing the problem.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is the so-called solution we see over and over again. Now, NYCHA has a budget of tens of billions of dollars a year. The head of NYCHA, Greg Russ, he's paid more than $400,000 a year, more than the president. Now, we confronted, a number of us here, including Chantel, Matthew, Ivan, and others, we confronted a series of politicians on the African American Day Parade, asking them why they hadn't gotten back to the petition. Because over 200 residents here at Manhattanville signed a petition against privatization. You know how many people voted in the TA election here? 63. So more than 3 times as many tenants signed the petition as even voted in the elections. Not one single politician, city council, Congress, Senate, state Senate, anything got back. Not the mayor, of course not. So we confronted some of these politicians at the African American Day Parade. And we asked them about this. None of them would give us a square answer. A few promised to follow up, then they didn't. But one stood out. State Senator Robert Jackson. You know what he said? He said, NYCHA isn't corrupt. So we put together a list of stories in the New York Times, New York Daily News, everything, detailing all the corruption, how much money disappears. Now, the whole lie with this privatization is that suddenly there's more money, but only if you privatize. Well, the truth is that this money's coming from the same source, the federal government and HUD. But the difference is, through the Section 8 program, they can funnel that money, not to the tenants, not to repairs, not to renovations, but to the private developers and the banks. And they will actually pay 3 times as much to those developers through Section 8 as they currently put into NYCHA. But you better believe that tenants will not see a dime of that money. Will not see a dime. We've seen these privatizations all across New York City and all across the country. Over in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg, one of the projects was privatized. I don't know how many people got sick. A number of tenants we know, seniors, had to go on oxygen because of how poorly those private companies came in and did the renovations. They spread all sorts of mold and lead dust and other chemicals into the air. People started having all sorts of asthma, bronchitis, breathing problems. That's the renovations they're talking about. Quick and cheap to get the payments from NYCHA and then flip the property. That's the game plan here, just as it's been all around the country. So with that being said, I'm going to call up Matthew from 95 Old Broadway to say a few words. Woo!
So they're looking to build this a luxury apartment building here, about 20 to 26 floors. Just what we need right about now. Like, there's gonna be higher income households coming here, and when they come and shop here, it's gonna raise the grocery prices. So and also their rent price is gonna be I don't know, it's gonna be higher than what we have to pay. And what else? It's gonna be blocking off the views from tenants that live right here. So and what else? I don't know, among other things that's going on right now, it's just like, I don't know, the failure with the COVID pandemic, and I don't know. It's just not what we need right now. Like, and they're also trying to, it's an attack on Manhattanville houses. Like, they have the PAC program, they have the RAD program, and then they have this luxury apartment building. The land here is owned by Columbia University. What? Like, this is NYCHA's idea of serving their tenants. Like, you know, they have, you know, whatever they say they're doing for the tenants is not. It's not what it's cut out to be. It's not. Yeah, at the African American Day Parade, we confronted the Attorney General, Letitia James, and basically we asked her, what does she know about privatization here at Manhattanville, at Jackie Robinson? Not a damn thing. She doesn't know what's going on. Like, she just named some other developments, as Chantal had mentioned at previous meetings. You know, I don't know what else. Like, yeah, that's why they don't have NYCHA tenants paid to have these parking lot spots, and you know, they're locking it off to build that luxury apartment building.
Are they going to
So,
give them their money back for people who pay?
you know,
Are you kidding me? For real? They're not going to give them their money back.
I don't think so. So the privatization, that's all Columbia doing. I mean, the backing of it.
I'll just continue at the same time.
Right? If you break down what's going on, Columbia is a backup.
Columbia definitely has a role, but a lot of
We've had City College here for years. City College never did that.
Okay.
Just to speak on what you're asking about, ma'am. So look, Columbia, going back decades, has a plan. They want their campus to extend from their main campus all the way up to 137th Street. That's the plan.
How much land they need?
Well, you know, look, this past year, they accepted 500 new undergraduate students on top of what they already have. Now, their dorms are already overcrowded. So in order to deal with this situation, they are looking to expand more dorms, more campus buildings, etc. They plan to just keep on growing and gobble up Harlem. And let me tell you, it's not just the Manhattanville campus there. It's not just here. Also, tenants at Grant are very worried. You know, they just got a new TA president who's against privatization, and we've been talking with her, going to some of their meetings there, and they're very worried about being gobbled up by Columbia. And what's more, right now Columbia has a course on redesigning Harlem. Now Columbia is working with the Eric Adams administration to redesign from 5th Avenue all the way to Morningside Heights on 125th Street, calling the Business Investment District. That, not coincidentally, happens to be one of the sections at Harlem that's seen the largest, the most purchases of properties by corporate institutional investors speculating on real estate, because that's going to be flipped. Now, in addition to planning to redesign that area, they have also talked about doing what they call increases in crime management in the vein of what are called smart cities. These are euphemisms for new dystopian surveillance technology. Have you ever seen, anyone ever seen that Tom Cruise science fiction movie Minority Report, where they got the computers that try to predict crime in advance? That's literally what they're talking about doing. Creating an integrated surveillance system that watches every single person at all times of the day, that interfaces people's Amazon Ring cameras and businesses' cameras to the local police, Department of Defense, FBI, and National Security Agency, using algorithms and artificial intelligence to track everyone's movements all the time. Now, we know with gentrification always comes also increased arrests, mass incarceration, and so on. It's part of the game plan. You got to drive people off their land. They don't want to go, throw them in jail, put them away for life or phony charges or whatever. This is all part of the Columbia's larger scheme and game plan to gobble up Harlem, to turn it into a playground for the rich. And the truth is, I think the model they're looking at in many ways is what they have in Paris, France right now. I don't know if people know about Paris, but increasingly most of downtown Paris is largely gentrified. It's mostly an area for rich people. There's still some neighborhoods that aren't, but around Paris in a ring are what are called the banlieue, the suburbs, but they're poor, ghettoized suburbs with big high-rise buildings where mostly Middle Eastern and African immigrants live. And the people who live there, they have to commute in several hours to the city to work and then commute home. The city's largely, increasingly, exclusively for rich people. What do we have going on right here in New York City? A very similar process. Universities like Columbia are pushing that. The average rent in Manhattan, market rate, is now $5,000 a month for a two-bedroom. $5,000 a month for a two-bedroom. So hopefully that answers some of your questions about Columbia. I'm going to pass the mic back to Matt.
Back to the African. Okay, can I hear? Am I being heard on this?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. The African American Day Parade. Attorney General of New York, Letitia James. She didn't. I don't know. We still haven't heard back from her. And you know, there's like 3,000-4,000 residents here at Manhattanville houses. So, not knowing what's going on here, like, you know, we have 6 buildings. You know, you're supposed to be served. This is a part of New York, like, you know, and she's not, like, you know, and then she's gonna want our vote again, you know. Mayor Eric Adams was there at the African American Day Parade. We didn't see much of him. What else? State Senator Robert Jackson was in support of privatization of public housing. So, or he was saying that privatization is good. You know, we've had public housing for decades, you know, and we just need to stop privatization, like that. And what else? State Senator Cordell Clare was also there. I don't remember exactly what her position was, but it wasn't in support of the tenants. It wasn't like, you know, extend.
Promised she would make a new statement that she never did.
Not making a public statement while we're about to have a luxury apartment built here in Manhattanville houses. We're about to have, you know, Columbia's about to take over the NYC, the housing. What's it called? The housing HPD building, the NYC HPD building, right across the street from 95 Old Broadway, and you know that's the early steps to gentrification, and we have to you know have a frontal assault on that. Like it's not gonna happen here in Manhattanville houses. Woo. That's it.
Thank you, Matthew. Luz, ¿quieres hablar un poquito?
Sí. Debes.
Hello everybody. Estamos aquí para luchar en contra de la privatización de Nacha. Por favor, nuestros vecinos, únanse a nuestra protesta. Defendamos nuestro vecindario. Acuérdate que si te sacan de aquí, ¿a dónde vas a vivir? Te van a llevar a un lugar lejos. Tú estás cómodo, tus hijos están cerca de la escuela, están cerca de todo. Vengan, protesten, porque mientras más personas hay, la lucha se hace más fuerte. Despierten, vengan a luchar contra lo tuyo. Te lo quieren quitar, te lo quieren arrebatar. Ven a luchar junto con nosotros. Defiende lo tuyo. No te lo dejes quitar. Ok, te esperamos. La unidad hace la fuerza.
I'll just translate what Luz said roughly. So she called on her neighbors to come out, to stand strong and join in the struggle, to not be afraid. Because look, here at Manhattanville, they're close to their school, the kids' schools, you got the train lines, you got the communities, the churches here. If people are forced to move out, where are they going to go? And if people come out and get involved, we have a lot of power. If we unite, we have strength. But if people are just complacent, comfortable, then they'll be pushed out. And she said, in unity, we have our power and our strength. Very powerful words. Hey, Kenny, you want to say a few words? No, okay. All right. Alice. Okay. So I'll just say a few more things while we wait for Alice to come up. I want to point out, it's not just the politicians in New York City that are in the pockets of developers. We also are dealing with this in other places. For example, in the UFAD branch in Boston, just confronted so-called progressive Democrat Ayanna Pressley. And she freaked out. The video is on her Twitter, you can check it out. She started yelling at them, going on about how she was doing an event for public housing, and she's a tenants' rights activist. Well, the event she was doing for public housing was a privatization event. She's supporting privatization. She also was involved in pushing for the destruction in Boston of the Harriet Tubman House, which is one of the few big public community centers left in Roxbury, in the heart of the black community in Boston, where Malcolm X came up. So these politicians, these so-called elected officials, representatives, they're not for us. Doesn't matter if there's a D or an R by their name. They do not stand with the people. Not a single politician here in New York City would take one stand, even write one statement supporting Manhattanville. Same thing with Jackie Robinson in East Harlem, where over half the residents signed a petition against privatization. We followed up with them over and over and over again. Last year, with Harlem River houses, when they were being privatized, Chuck Schumer went on the One NYCHA podcast. Maybe some of you all are familiar with it. One of the tenant activists in NYCHA, she does a podcast. And so we got her to ask Chuck Schumer, will you support the tenants from Harlem River houses in their fight against privatization? He said, oh yeah, sure, you know, I will. I'll make a statement, yep. We got his number from her. Followed up with him, nothing, not a single word from Chuck Schumer. His word wasn't even worth the air that passed out of his mouth. We followed him to an event. We heard he was doing an event all the way in Far Rockaway. So we went there to ask him, Chuck Schumer, you said you would support tenants. One of the tenants from, not just from Harlem River houses, from Wrangell and Polo Ground went out too, because they knew they were next in the chopping block. Chuck Schumer's staff silenced the tenants who asked him questions, made them look like crazy people, tried to tell them, get out of here, get out of here. That's how the politicians feel about tenants in NYCHA. They come around once every few years to get your vote. They don't care about you. They don't care about us. They think we're stupid. They think we're ignorant. They think we'll not see through their lies and schemes, that we will be deceived by their speeches and their advertisements, and that they can get us to go out every year and vote for them because supposedly they care about us, or at least they're better than the alternative. This whole logic of lesser evil. But the people have had to deal with a lot of evil here. A lot of evil, a lot of neglect, a lot of lack of repairs, mold, asbestos, lead, kids growing up with asthma, roaches, rats, water that's leaking all the time that NYCHA then just suddenly turns off without even a day's notice. For decades, people have been seeing the buildings decline around them, and that's no accident. That's a conscious policy of both parties. So we don't need no more evil. We need something good, something that's really and truly good for the people. And a first step would be stopping the privatization of Manhattanville, giving back this parking lot, opening back up the tenant patrol room in 1470, and stopping all this nonsense. Because it's ridiculous what they're doing. It's absolutely absurd.
I have a question. How do we do that? How do we talk about?
Yeah. So what we've been doing is a few-pronged approach. Protests and organizing like this. We got these petitions to sign against the privatization. We have weekly meetings every Thursday in the community center there at 6 p.m. every Thursday, 6 to 8 or so. People got to come out, but you got to get your neighbors out too, and we got to be regular. But also, we got to link up to stuff. You see a bunch of students here, a number of them from Columbia and CUNY, and other places too, to build that awareness, get the support, because back in the 80s, I know Ivan talks about this a good deal, a lot of Columbia students helped out here with the struggle, and even going back to the 60s, and that was helpful and successful. We got to link up with other developments too, including Grant, Jackie Robinson, St. Nicholas houses. They're dealing with a whole big mess of lead over there. If we can unite those struggles, it's like a bunch of little streams, you know. If they're left by themselves, they can dry up and trickle out. But if we bring them together, it can be a big and powerful river. That's what we got to do, but that takes a lot of work. And then we got to get media coverage, and we have a lawsuit, but the lawsuit's not everything. I'll tell you about a lawsuit that we did. So we have a class action lawsuit right now against HUD, because by law, they're not allowed to let NYCHA privatize if NYCHA isn't fulfilling its basic responsibilities to the tenants, which it's clearly not. We filed a lawsuit against NYCHA last year around the privatization of Harlem River houses, got it on an expedited track, and got it in front of a judge. And our argument was very clear. With privatization, tenants lose rights. It's very obvious and open. It's an open and shut case. The judge, this is what she said, and this is the scary state of the country right now. She said, I'm not going to talk about whether or not you may or may not be losing rights with privatization. Because as tenants, you do not have standing, you do not have a right to sue NYCHA over losing your rights. So basically, you have a right, but you don't have the right to have that right enforced. So what sort of right is that? What sort of legal protection is that? That's not worth the paper it's written on. It's not a Judge Judy thing. That's the thing. You know, we see all the time on TV, Judge Judy in the movies. People go in court, they hear it out, and they get justice. But these courts are so in the pockets of the developers and the big banks who are pushing this privatization-packed gentrification scheme that we can't find much there. Now, the lawsuit did help to slow things down. It bought us about a year at Harlem River Houses. Longer than they said they were initially going to privatize, and we pushed it back a year, you know? But that can't be the end-all be-all. And I got to be honest with you, a lot of tenants I met there and other places have had hopes. If we just get a lawsuit, we'll get them in court, it'll win. But that's not how it works. Because like I said, this is a rigged game. So we have to have the numbers and the people power to win this. The legal front can be one component of that, give them a headache, but that's not going to be the battle that wins us this war. All right, I wanted to call up Alice, but she's talking. I want to open up the mic. Come on up, yeah. If you all want to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Sydney. I'm a student at Barnard College.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm also a student at Barnard. I think we more or less wanted to just talk about what we've seen as people who are a part of Columbia University. And I think like the number one thing is that Columbia University is ultimately a business. It does not care about either the people who are a part of the university nor the people who it is affecting with its expansion. It is trying to bring in more money it is trying to get students in. It's not about retaining the students. It's not about anything beyond that. It is trying to expand to look more attractive to people who look to come in and join the university and bring the university more money.
Yeah, so raise your hand if you're a student here. Any students? Okay, it's great that you guys came out, but where are the rest of our students? At Columbia, on the campus, a couple weeks ago, we had a big protest there. So students can come out onto low steps and protest, but when they actually have to come out to, you know, Manhattanville, make the little train trip, where are they?
It's like a 10-minute walk, too. You don't even need to take the train. You can walk here.
We, at Columbia and Barnard, I think there's a really big culture around activism and around awareness, but the thing is being aware and being educated and learning things like theory about the power of the people and about how how oppression works in this country is not enough. Learning and spreading awareness is not enough. So if you're a student and if you care about these issues, just know that going to your classes and, you know, learning about critical theory is not going to be enough. You need to be, you know, out working specifically with the people of the community that you care about. Also, obviously, it's so important to support, you know, student organizations, student workers, but we have to acknowledge that as students at these colleges, we are taking up space in New York in a way that is different than people who have lived here for a long time. You know, we're living on the land that Columbia is gentrifying. We're contributing to that gentrification. So just by going to those schools. So if you want to help, you need to get out there and you need to be working directly with people from the community, not just students, getting out, you know, into the streets, being active and, you know, working with the people of the community, not just talking. So yeah, if you're a student, you know, spread awareness to your other students, ask them to come out, have those conversations, but make sure that people are joining local organizations, not just clubs at the school, to really get out into the world, into the streets, and make a difference. Thank you.
I grew up on 111th Street, right nearby. I grew up watching Columbia change my neighborhood, watching all of the local businesses get turned into big retailers that better serve the student population, because frankly no one that I knew was really going to the like new Lululemon store or all of these little like big bright neon shops that were popping up around and replacing all of the local bodegas and retailers. And a lot of that was driven by the new kind of character that Columbia was trying to bring into the community. And then as someone who ended up like going to Columbia and being a part of the institution, I was like, education means nothing if you're not, like learning doesn't mean anything if you're not going to use what you're learning to change to change the reality. So I hear a lot of people with the excuse where it's like, I'm trying to learn so that I can change, but you can do both at once. You can learn and like fight at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, thank you guys. And if Chantal or Alice wants to say a few words, we'll give up the mic to them.
Hi everyone. My name's Rhiannon. I'm a journalism student at City College right up the way. For the past 3 or 4 weeks, I've been working on a story about the privatization of NYCHA and specifically of the Manhattanville houses. And I think that, you know, as some of the students here have already talked about, there's a really important relationship between students in a community and the community at large. And as somebody who has moved to New York from another state, it's something that I'm trying to be very aware of and trying to, you know, do my best to play a good role in. So that's been something that has influenced the way I've gone about writing this story. And when I got involved with the paper at my school and I got involved with this story, it was really important to me that I highlighted voices from the actual community. It wasn't enough to go through NYCHA's website and say, what are they saying about this issue? It wasn't enough to go to the protests and, you know, write about what people said on the microphone. It was also about going and interviewing people at the developments, going door to door and talking to them. And through all of this, I feel like I've learned a lot of important things, but one that has really stuck out to me is the importance of believing in something. I think that, you know, I've talked to a lot of people at this development and at other developments as well while working on this story, and a common thing that I hear, not as common, luckily, as, you know, the opposite, but something that I've heard a fair amount is that, you know, what's the point? We keep having this, we keep coming back to this issue, we keep coming back to these parking lots, and we keep coming back to this microphone, saying the same things, asking for the same kinds of respect and treatment that we should have been having this entire time. And the hardest thing is to say, yes, we keep coming back, and no, it's not happening instantaneously the way it should. And yes, we're going to keep coming back. And I think that speaking to the people in this complex specifically, people who have lived here for 50 plus years, people who know what this place can be and are not going to just move out, are not going to just say, it's hard and it's too much and it's not fair because it isn't, and move out, but are going to stick around and do their best to make it better, to bring it back to what it was. I think I've learned that it's not going to be easy, and that you have too many forces working against you for anything to happen smoothly like this. But I also think that the most important things that happen, the things that make it in the history books and the things that change the trajectory of our species and our development as a society, are also the things that are the hardest to come by. So I really appreciate all of you coming out here, and I really appreciate the UFAD and the tenants here for helping me with the story and for welcoming me into the community. So, thank you.
Very well said. Chantal, you want to speak?
Hi everyone, my name is Chantal. I'm very glad to be out here today. Yeah, I just want to kind of echo what Rhiannon was saying, which is that this is not an easy fight. This is not something where we can just send in a petition, have a few protests, have a few meetings. This is a long-term struggle. That's because the people who are running this country, people who are running NYCHA, people who are running Columbia, these developers, these banks, they have fundamentally different interests than the people who live here. As people have spoken about, the privatization is not for tenants. It's not going to improve things. These private companies are not going to do these repairs, despite what all their marketing PR meetings and publicity tries to say, despite the fact that they pick a few tenants who say privatization is good, despite the fact that there's some tenant association presidents who say that privatization will be good for their development. Those people don't represent the actual interests of the tenants. You know, these politicians, like Matthew was speaking about before when we went to confront them at the African American Day Parade, these are the people who say that they represent the people of Manhattanville, people of Harlem, people of New York City. They literally ran away. Like, we tried to talk to Mark Levine, Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine. His office is a few blocks away. We said, hey, we sent you a petition on August 16th. This is a month later. And he said, yeah, I support the tenants, but please talk to my assistant, and ran away. We saw him for maybe a second. And it's the same thing for these other politicians. Actually, he did write a statement earlier this year saying he was concerned about how the pact privatization was being carried out. He didn't say he was opposed to the privatization. He said NYCHA should be following the rules a little bit better. Well, that's not what we're saying. We're saying the privatization shouldn't be happening at all. But then when it comes time that actually the people here are organizing and fighting, that over 200 people have signed this petition opposing privatization, then he's nowhere to be found. So these politicians, you know, they'll make a statement here and there when they think it's politically convenient for them, but they don't want to actually stand with the people. They're only here, they put up their little signs when it's time to vote. That's when we see them. But so this is a long-term struggle. You know, we have to build up organizations that are able to fight for tenants' interests, whether it's against privatization, but also to demand that NYCHA fix up the buildings. Because the way that NYCHA has treated people, the tenants, is criminal. How many people have just water gushing out of their apartment walls right now? How many people have mold? How many people have lead, asbestos, arsenic in the water? It's much more than obviously we actually see in the articles, or much more than actually gets tested. Actually, right now, some Columbia students are testing the water in Manhattanville and other NYCHA developments for lead. They're doing their independent testing because, of course, we can't rely on whatever NYCHA is saying. But we have to build up the power of the people. That's really the only way forward, because we see we can't rely on these politicians, nor can we rely on these nonprofits that they hire. You know, actually, some of us we were in Boston last weekend for a protest against this so-called tenant empowerment conference. So it was the Housing Authority in Boston, the Mayor Michelle Wu, and then these nonprofits. One of them is called City Life, that are pushing the privatization. They say, yeah, you might be concerned that there's some negative effects of privatization, but don't worry, we'll make sure that doesn't happen. These nonprofits are some of the creepiest entities. I mean, they really say, just like these progressive politicians, that they're there for the people. You know, they say City Life is a tenant organization, but it's a lie. They're just appendages of, you know, the rich elite who are running everything, but they want to make sure they can co-opt people's outrage into something else. But so, you know, people have been organizing here at Manhattanville throughout this year. We've had protests down at the flagpole. We had a protest at City Hall. We had a great protest at Columbia a few weeks ago against Columbia's gentrification of Harlem. We had, you know, various petitions. We confronted the politicians because we know this is a long-term struggle. We know that we have to be consistent and that we have to stick together. The people in power, they're going to try to divide people in every way they can. And part of that is also by trying to convince people that there's no point in fighting back. But what's going to happen if we don't fight back? We can see very clearly. We can see, even just with this issue of privatization, how it's happened at other cities, how the rate of homelessness in San Francisco has skyrocketed in the last few decades. There's nowhere for people to go. People at Night Show, when we're talking about privatization, they're saying, I have nowhere to go. I can't afford market rate in Manhattan. What is it, $5,000 for a 2-bedroom? Can't afford market rate even in New York. Maybe, you know, people are saying they have to go down south. But like Rhiannon was saying, we're here and we're staying. We're fighting to say no to privatization, no to gentrification, to say that we have to fight for dignity and respect. We have to defend our homes, our communities, our lives. That's the only way. All power to the people. I'll say it one more time. All power to the people. All power to the people.
Okay. We got to get a little more enthusiasm on the chants. We'll do one we did a few times. We were downtown and then at Columbia. I'll say dare to struggle, and then you all say dare to win. Dare to struggle. Come on, a little more energy. Dare to struggle. Dare to struggle. You know, Fred Hampton, the deputy chairman of the Black Panther Party in Illinois, used to say, if you don't dare to struggle, you don't deserve to win. Because this life is a struggle. And anything good that people have gotten in this country has come from a whole lot of struggle. So this struggle right now against privatization is just one in the series of a long history of people in this country fighting against injustice and oppression, fighting against gentrification and all sorts of attacks on the people from the powers that be. So someone else want to speak? Come on up, come on up. You just want to introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Zach. I'm with Class Struggle Education Workers and the Internationalist Group. And so I guess I want to start off about talking about my experience with NYCHA. For about 6 years, I worked as a social worker in Red Hook, Brooklyn, and I've seen firsthand the lack of care that NYCHA puts towards its tenants, the oppression and cyclical and ingrained neglect of repairs. People going without water, without heat during the winter, giving a new stove, which is really a burner, a hot plate. So we know that NYCHA is not interested in caring for the tenants. But one person asked earlier, so how do we fight for this, right? And us at the Internationalist Group and Class Struggle Education Workers, we believe in class struggle. So what does that mean? It means understanding which side of the class line you are on. And as somebody said earlier, these privatizers, these developers, these Democratic and Republican politicians, they are not on our side. They are on the side of the capitalists. They are not on the side of regular everyday people and workers, of teachers, sanitation workers, warehouse workers, dock workers. So when you ask, how do we fight against this type of oppression? It's through class struggle, workers' action. That means joining with teachers' unions, warehouse unions, graduate student unions, adjunct unions, to come out and take a stand. Because with that type of power, we can smash capitalism. That is the type of power that we're talking about. And people think, okay, why bother? Why bother? What examples do we have of this working? I'll give you an example, right? When the war in Iraq came out, dock workers on the West Coast protested against that war, shut down the entire West Coast seaboard in solidarity with Iraqi dock workers as well, to take a stand against capitalist oppression. Oppression just like we're experiencing here at the Manhattanville housing project. So we don't believe the Mayor Adams and the Democratic Party, but we also don't believe these so-called pretenders who make us want to believe that they're on our side, like Julia Salazar from the DSA, a so-called alternative and progressive fraud, exactly, fraud, voting for privatization. And we see these characters all over the place. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, fraud. Shawna Sawant, fraud. Julia Salazar, fraud. So these groups, although they have a nice sounding message, they're not for workers' action. They're not on the side of class struggle because they believe in the illusion of justice under a capitalist system. And us at the Internationalist Group, we have a different saying. We're for revolution, for socialist revolution to smash capitalist oppression. So we don't believe justice is going to be achieved under this capitalist system. We have a saying that only revolution can bring justice. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to mention a little bit about Julia Salazar. For those who have not had the misfortune of meeting her or interacting with her, I say that's great for you, but you might as well know, since she is the chief sponsor of the so-called Housing Preservation Trust, which is a piece of legislation in Albany that is set up to privatize the entirety of NYCHA within the next few years. Salazar claims this is a socialist program. She says it's for the people, so on and so forth. It's a bunch of crap. Just yesterday, in Twitter comments, this is how low these people stoop, Salazar actually attacked United Front Against Displacement. Said, no one in UFAD even knows anything about public housing or lives in public housing. What about Matthew? What about Ivan? What about Kenny? What about how many other people, Luz, Paul, so many others who are here and aren't here today? I mean, give me a break. These people, literally, these elected officials, cannot deal with criticism from the people. So they have to say it's all fake, it's all phony, it's all nonsense. But they're fake, they're phony, they're nonsense. They're, excuse my language, they're full of shit. They don't care about the people. They are bought and paid for by the developers. And they claim that they're going to help, but things just keep getting worse year after year after year. Now, the problems we face in this society, it's not from lack of stuff. There's more than enough to go around for everyone in this country and around the world to have decent housing, living conditions, and everything, and a whole lot more. The problem we face is how this society is set up. It's a rigged game for the rich and powerful, where each and every year they get richer and richer and richer, while the poor keep on getting poorer. For example, during the pandemic and lockdowns and everything in 2020, most people got a lot poorer, lost their jobs, had to subsist on the meager stimulus checks. But did you know that the billionaires in this country literally added billions of dollars to their net worth? You could see in real time, at rapid pace, how the rich were getting richer, while the rest of us got poorer and poorer. And now as inflation eats a bigger and bigger chunk out of each of our paychecks, they're talking about taking away public housing, kicking people out onto the streets. 600,000 people live in public housing in New York City, if not more. 600,000. Could you imagine the impact of 600,000 people in the next 3 years in New York City being kicked out of their homes with nowhere to go? Meanwhile, a study just showed yesterday there are 88,000 vacant, rent-stabilized apartments in New York City being kept off the market, intentionally not rented out by the big banks and corporate landlords to drive up the cost of rent to astronomical levels as part of their speculative real estate investment scam. When they talk about the economy, that's largely what they're talking about. And that whole house of cards is falling down right now. But they want it to fall right on top of us. That's why they're displacing people here at Manhattanville. That's why they're printing all this money, causing inflation. And they tell us there's no money for housing. Well, you know what the estimated cost, which is way overestimate, but to fix up all the public housing in the country was? $80 billion. That sounds like a lot of money, but consider this. Since the start of this year, the US government has sent over $120 billion for the war in Ukraine, which risks starting World War III and nuclear war to annihilate all of humanity. So they have money for nuclear missiles and war abroad. They have money for, 74,000 or 47,000 new IRS agents to come after everyone for taxes, and they're not coming after the rich people who don't pay taxes. They're coming after average working class people. But they don't have no money for public housing. Give me a break. This is a rigged system we live in. And the fight here against privatization is a key part of the fight against that larger system. The people standing up and saying enough is enough. We're not going to take this crap anymore. So with that being said, I want to call up Brianna from Barnard, who's going to speak a little bit about this walking tour that she and others are organizing. It's happening tomorrow.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good? I'm not doing too good because today is Columbia's homecoming game, and there's not a lot to celebrate because Columbia has been actively gentrifying West Harlem and displacing its residents for a very long time, and it's a history that we need to talk about. Public housing started in New York City in the Lower East Side in 1935 as a part of the New Deal programs. The largest stock of public housing is in New York City, like Ryan was just mentioning. Potentially displacing hundreds of thousands of residents is a crime, and it needs to be looked at as such. Tomorrow, I'm hosting a walking tour in collaboration with UFAD, Housing Equity Project, which is a student-led collective at Columbia, Community Board Number 9, and other radical housing organizations, where we're going to be exploring housing and the history of West Harlem, starting from City College, all the way to Manhattanville public housing, to the Forum, and to other sites. And we're going to be talking about the history of West Harlem, the rich history of Black and brown communities, and all of the wonderful things that they've done, and then all of the changes that have been happening in this neighborhood since Columbia's expansion, and even prior to that, when the state actually initiated a lot of gentrification in the area in the 1970s and 80s. My name is Brianna Sturkey. I'm actually an alumna of Barnard College. I wrote a thesis talking about Columbia's displacement of Harlem residents and their abuse of eminent domain law, which is something that we're going to be talking about, the major court cases against Columbia. And if people are interested in learning more and connecting with these wonderful organizations doing the work to end gentrification and residential displacement, please come up to me. I have an RSVP link that I can send to you for tomorrow. It's at noon. We're meeting at 137. The MTA stop on the one train at the Montefiore Square, the park right next to the train. And if you guys are interested in joining and connecting and learning more and learning how to resist gentrification and join in on these struggles, please come up to me. And thank you guys for having me here.
Can you just explain the eminent domain and how they grabbed that campus spot over there?
Okay, well, I could talk forever about that. It's a really complicated process. Eminent domain is a constitutional amendment which allows for private entities to take land as long as they pay just compensation. And Columbia did not disclose eminent domain for several of their takings. They announced their project for Manhattanville in like 2005, 2006, but for 3 years before that, they were secretly buying up properties. They already owned 51% of the land that they were going to use for Manhattanville before they even announced it. And they were engaging in these fake community engagement conversations and meetings, trying to pretend like they were getting community output, even though they already had their plan set in motion. And when the few business owners that refused to sell, which was Tuck It Away Storage in a gas station that was on Broadway, when they refused to sell, they invoked eminent domain. They hired a economic development corporation to do a blight study, even though they were already paying them and they were a consultant. And they found, of course, the blight that they were looking for, and that allowed them to take the lands away from them against their will, as long as they paid them market value at the time for what their land was. It's a really complicated process. We're going to talk more about it on the tour tomorrow, and we're actually going to visit the site where the whole case went down and everything. So, yeah, I look forward and hope you guys can join tomorrow. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for speaking. You know, when I first heard about that, I thought it had to be a mistake. I was confused, actually. Loretta, who can't be here because she's got work, she was telling me about it. And I was saying, I thought eminent domain was just for the government to build a highway or train station or something. She was saying, no, Colombia used that. It didn't make any sense to me. Of course, it didn't make sense because it shouldn't make sense, because it's not right what they did. But technically, legally, they had the right. So they were able to beat the court case around it. But this just shows the basic question which we're constantly dealing with in this society, which is, how should society be moving and going forward? Should it be for the interests of the rich and powerful to remake the city, the country, whatever they want in their image, for their enjoyment, and kick anybody out who's an obstacle to that? Or should the people be able to decide what makes sense and what's best for us, and not have some rich and powerful bank or university or corporation come around and tell us what's what and how we got to move the hell out because they're going to build some fancy new thing that's better than anything people have now, and this, that, and the third. So the mic's open if anyone wants to come up and speak right now. Anyone has any questions? So there was just a study that was done that came out in the news yesterday. It was 88,000 rent-stabilized apartments. So rent-stabilized is a little bit less than rent-controlled, but basically 88,000 rent-stabilized apartments in New York City that the landlords are keeping off the market, warehousing them. Now that's just rent-stabilized. That's not counting market rate. It seems weird. Why would they do this? Because don't they make money from renting? Well, the truth is, there is such a monopoly that the landlords have that they can hold all of these off the market to drive up the cost of rent and other developments, and that makes them a lot of money. What's more, they count it on their books as an asset which is appreciating in value. Put it this way, the stock market this year is way down, but if real estate's not so down or even up, then they can make profit just buying a place, not renting it out, and just holding it. So it's not just apartments, or rent-stabilized apartments, or market rate apartments. According to the US government's own statistics, there are 16.5 million vacant houses in this country. 16.5 million vacant houses. How do we have anyone homeless when we have 16.5 million vacant houses? How are you cramming people into those shelters that are full of abuse and bed bugs and all sorts of nonsense when you've got houses you can put people in? Now I know people sometimes on the streets, they need help, mental health stuff, rehab programs, whatever, but we got the housing. We got more than enough housing to go around to house everybody and then some. But they don't want to rent it out because they have that monopoly. And as long as they have that monopoly, they can dictate the price, drive it up, count it as an asset on their books. And like we saw in 2008, remember, it was the housing market that was so central to the banking industry, all the financial services, that crashed and almost brought down the whole economy. Because since they outsource a lot of the jobs in this country and the production overseas, a lot of the economy has gone to speculation. That's why it's so much harder for people to find any sort of decent job these days than even in the last decades of the 60s and 70s. So much of how the whole economy is built is on the housing bubble. Now, after 2008, a lot of that shifted away from the suburbs, they have all these extra houses, into the inner city. And that's why we've seen so much gentrification since then in Harlem, in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, because they have gone on an asset buying spree, land grabs. So hopefully that answers some of your questions. And there's a lot about that, and we've written about that in Urban Core, our magazine. Come on up, Alice.
Hey everyone. Okay. My name is Alice. I'm a member of UFAD. No soy nativa en español, pero voy a hablar un poquito de lo que han dicho todas las personas aquí. Estamos aquí porque quieren privatizar al housing público o alojamiento público en Nueva York. Y forma parte de su plan para cambiar totalmente el carácter de la ciudad, de cómo es ahorita. Como, claro, hay secciones de la ciudad que son, que ya son solo para los ricos, pero todavía hay partes para donde viven los trabajadores, no sé, la gente normal, pero quieren que sea totalmente para los ricos, como ha dicho Ryan earlier, más como una ciudad como París, donde no se puede vivir en el centro de la ciudad y pues los trabajadores y la gente normal de bajos recursos tienen que vivir fuera de la ciudad y ir en el tren por horas simplemente para trabajar, y quieren que sean así Nueva York, aunque no es ahorita. Y en Nueva York ahorita estamos mirando una crisis en housing, pero esa crisis es artificial, totalmente artificial, porque hay de hecho hay suficiente apartamentos suficiente para toda la gente que no tiene hogar, que está viviendo en las calles. Y acaba de publicar ayer un artículo mostrando que hay más o menos 90,000 apartamentos sin personas viviendo aquí dentro. Y podemos ver allá que esa crisis de la falta de housing no es por falta de recursos, pero es por falta de voluntad política al lado del alcalde, del gobierno de la ciudad, y quieren hacer que hay que privatizar o quieren crear como justificaciones para privatizar el housing público aquí en Nueva York y en todo el país, de hecho, y a través de manejar una crisis de housing. Y ¿qué más? Yeah, so just trying to, summarize a few points. My Spanish is not so good, but hopefully that helps a little bit for people. Yeah, really good to be out here. I don't know if anyone else wants to come up on the mic. Todo el poder al pueblo. We could also talk, maybe, I don't know if anyone has questions about what's going on here at Manhattanville, what's going on in the city. We're talking about the empty apartments. So if you read the article closely that came out in the city, it's actually a pretty damning exposure of how the landlords operate, because they're making all these claims that the rent stabilization program makes it unprofitable for them to make any money. They can't do repairs, so they need the city to give them more loopholes so they can get rid of rent stabilization. And they're trying to keep these apartments off the market as a way to kind of strong-arm that through. But if you actually look at the details, which the journalists who wrote that article did, you find out that actually the apartments that they're keeping off the market right now, they actually have quite a high rent. I think the average rent in there is $1,900 something a year or a month. And if you go through and actually look at the profits that these landlord companies are making off of rent stabilization, it's pretty generous. They're really doing quite well, pulling in millions and millions of dollars. So the idea that it's just not profitable, it's not feasible for them, they're just pretty greedy, and they're looking to try to get rid of what little, barriers to raising the rent constantly that there are. I think they used to be able to raise the rent anytime a tenant moved out. They have an opportunity to up it several $100s, and they closed that loophole a few years ago. They're trying to get that back. But what's that say about our political system when an essential good can be kept off the market by a small group of people just to force little concessions?
Okay, so thanks everyone for being out here at Manhattanville. I think people mentioned it before, but actually right now, Columbia is celebrating their gentrification of Harlem with their Manhattanville Community Day right over there at 125th and Broadway throughout the Manhattanville campus. We heard some of these politicians who have been totally ignoring us will be there, including Adriano Espaillat. So we're gonna pack up all this stuff right now. We have these 3 banners we're gonna march over, and then we're just gonna end our protest over there. So you all now know what the plan is.
And we need some volunteers to help with the banners to carry them.
Yeah, they're nice banners. This one says tenant power is greater than corporate power. Before we head over, we're just going to pack up here. I'll take a quick picture of everyone meeting right here, and then we'll walk over.
Here behind the banner, we're going to photo real quick. We're going to march over together. Todos ven acá, vamos a sacar una foto juntos y después vamos a ir por la nueva campus de Colombia porque ellos tienen un día de, ¿cómo se dice?, celebración de su identificación de Harlem. Entonces, ven acá para la foto. Todo detrás de nosotros.
I'll take a picture, so if you guys...
Venga, venga.
Brandon, you actually have a camera. Yeah, you want me to take it? Yeah, I can take it on my phone if you want and send it to you. Yeah.
Why don't one of you all go on the other side with the other banner?
Yeah, go in the sun also.
Sorry. Get ready to prepare. Get ready for it. What's going on?
All right, give us a countdown.
All right.
Yeah, fists up for power to the people.
Yeah,
Sorry
hands
about
up
it.
or something.
Oh.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Power to the people!
Oh, wait, I wasn't ready.
Count us down again.
3, 2, 1.
Power to the people!
All
right.
right, let me take one on my phone.
Okay.
I'm ready again.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Power to the people!
Got it.
All right, let's march.
Okay.
Okay, so someone hold this. All right, so just give us 1 minute to get everything packed up for our table, and then we'll head over together. We can get the banner up front. Let's get, you guys are going to lead us with the Manhattanville tenants against privatization. It's right across Broadway we're going, so we'll go together. What we're going to do.
What happened to the ladies over there? I want her to go. And they should bring back the old rules and add rules, and they shouldn't let these problems. I had this Sophie. You don't worry. I'm going up to go across Columbia? Oh no.
We're just going to walk right there across Broadway.
I know. The whole tennis association is good. But the new people come in here and
Yeah, we'll get more next time. Look, you got to tell your neighbors. Every Thursday, we're in the community center here at 6 p.m. Tell them
6 p.m.?
6 p.m. every Thursday. You come out, bring your neighbors out.
Okay.
That's what it's going to take, because each person's going to bring a couple more people, then we'll have the numbers.
Okay, I'll tell you. I'll see.
Okay.
All right. I think we're ready.
They better come to these meetings. We need numbers.
All right, let's do it.
We need numbers, right? Okay. Yes. What he said?
Yeah, we'll go this way.
To the center?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What time
I hope
do you
it be.
6 p.m. Thursdays. 6 p.m. Thursdays. Let's go to the center.
Sure.
Because we'll do no to privatization, anti-gentrification.
Yeah.
No to privatization, anti-gentrification. No to privatization,
Anti-gentrification.
No to privatization.
Anti-gentrification.
Come on, we need some energy. No to privatization.
Anti-gentrification.
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 Dare to struggle.
Dare to win.
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 What's up, bro? Not much. I'm sorry, I'm covering it, so yeah.
No, we gotta have it going. No rad, no pack. We used to stop the privatization.
Rad, no pack, all over.
Okay, do you want to read it? Do you want to show us out? I can hold it.
Okay. No rad, no pact, it's all a phony act. No rad, no pact, it's all a phony act. No rad, no pact, it's all a phony act. No rad, no pact, it's all a phony act. No rad, no pact, it's all a phony act. No rad, no pact, it's all a phony act. Woo! No to privatization, no to gentrification.
No to privatization. No to gentrification. No to privatization. No to gentrification. No to privatization. No to gentrification. No to privatization. No to gentrification. No to privatization. No to gentrification. No to privatization. No to gentrification. Woo!
Over there, Science Center. Over there, right? It's over there.
Yeah, it's over there.
Science Center, yeah.
Every time they gentrify, Columbia's profits multiply.
Every time they gentrify, every time they. What? Hello?
Hello? Okay.
Every time they gentrify, Columbia's profits multiply. 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 Every time they gentrify, Columbia's profits multiply.
Here, let's cross here. Or the next stop. Yeah, just so we can wait for everyone to get here. We're about to get a... We'll go right here, side.
Okay.
How does it go? We'll get that going once we cross it. All right, so let's all cross together.
Every time they gentrify, Columbia's profits multiply. 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 Every time they gentrify,
Columbia's profits multiply. Every time they gentrify, Columbia's profits multiply.
So here we're walking by Columbia's Manhattanville campus. Look at this Manhattanville market. There's a rock climbing gym here. At our last protest at Columbia, Brittany, who grew up here, said she came to this rock climbing gym to ask, could the kids from Manhattanville come and try out some rock climbing? They said, sure, it's just $200.
Per kid.
Per kid. All of this is obviously not meant for the people of Harlem, for the people of Manhattanville and Grant. It's meant for the rich elite.
Here we go.
And today at this event, Columbia has brought in the politicians, the different businesses. Of course, there are no tenants of NYCHA here. NYCHA tenants are not welcome here. The plaza where we're coming up to says this is open to the public, except you have to check with us first before a group ever gathers here. Every time they gentrify, Columbia's profits multiply. 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 Every time they gentrify, Columbia's profits multiply.
So what we've seen is Columbia pursue a policy of unrepentant, aggressive expansion into Harlem, where they have gobbled up block after block, where they used eminent domain to illegally kick out tenants and businesses and forcibly transform the demographic character of the neighborhood as part of their racist scheme to transform Harlem. They want to turn this whole area into a playground for the rich, but the people have had enough. They're sick and tired of it. Tenants from Manhattanville, in particular, right across the street, are tired of it. Their project is being privatized, and Columbia has its eyes on it, just like they have their eyes on Grant houses, and they have their eyes on a whole lot of this real estate. Columbia has made it clear they want their campus to go all the way up to 137th Street and beyond. They're gentrifying even in Inwood. These little phony communities they put on are not for the people. They're not for the tenants of NYCHA, who they're driving out of the area. They're not for the tenants who they've collaborated with the police to arrest and incarcerate in huge numbers. This is part of Columbia's scam and scheme to redesign Harlem. They even literally have a class that is doing this in conjunction with the Eric Adams administration. So we're calling on people to take a stand against this. If you go to Columbia or not, if you come out to their events or not, take a stand, oppose privatization, oppose their gentrification schemes, oppose their unrepentant attacks on the people of Harlem. Every time they gentrify, Columbia's profits multiply. Every time they gentrify, Columbia's profits multiply. Every time they gentrify, Columbia's profits multiply. You want to speak, Matthew?
My name is Matthew, and I live at 95 Old Broadway. Columbia owns the land that we live on. But I don't even know what to say. You know, we have 6 buildings, 3,000 to 4,000 residents. Columbia University, what are you guys doing for us? You guys have a whole community benefits agreement, 150 pages long, and you guys are not doing a damn thing for Manhattanville houses. The executives at Columbia University Where are you guys? You guys own the land of Manhattanville houses and Grant houses. We're saying no to privatization, no to gentrification.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you. All right. Well, this is the tail end of our program. We just had a protest over at Manhattanville. So I just want to say we have Ivan here with us. I know Ivan said he doesn't want to speak today. I just wanted to point out, look, Ivan has been fighting the gentrification in Harlem. He lives at Manhattanville, going back all the way to the 80s, when actually some students from Columbia came outside his apartment and others, and they were protesting. And based on that, he learned about what Columbia was doing in the neighborhood and got involved in the struggle, and he's been an activist since then, fighting against gentrification. And I hope we can all take up that spirit that Ivan embodies and so many other tenants do, of continuing the struggle year after year. Yeah, and I'm going to call Brianna to speak just about this walking tour. Or whatever you want to speak. Okay.
Hello. Everyone standing here right now, I hope that you're also aware of Columbia's Community Benefits Agreement that they signed in 2009 with the Community Board Number 9. And if you're not aware, I'm going to read a couple fun facts for you. In 2001, Columbia began purchasing properties in West Harlem 2 years prior to publicly announcing their Manhattanville project to the student body or the West Harlem community. And by 2003, when they first publicly disclosed their campus expansion efforts, they already owned 51% of the properties in West Harlem, while engaging in fake and facade community engagement meetings. Did you know that Columbia worked with the New York City Economic Development Corporation to purchase properties in West Harlem in 2001, and then used this same agency in 2006 to declare the remaining properties who refused to sell to them blighted, so that they could use eminent domain law and force the owners to sell to Columbia? Did you know in 2005, the Columbia Daily Spectator, a student-run newspaper, obtained documents that exposed an undisclosed deal between Columbia trustees and New York State officials, in which trustees asked the state to condemn several businesses in West Harlem with a promise of $300,000 to cover any legal fees that might arise from these actions? Did you know that the Community Benefits Agreement signed between Columbia and the Community Board Number 9 expires on December 31st, 2040? Meaning that after this date, Columbia is no longer legally responsible to uphold any promises or provisions outlined in the CBA, but they're supposed to be great neighbors. Did you know in 2018 it was discovered that less than 1% of the $20 million Affordable Housing Fund, a part of the CBA agreement, has been spent so far, and that this Affordable Housing Fund is set to expire in 2024, next year? If you didn't know all these facts, please join me on my walking tour tomorrow. If you're interested in RSVPing, please come up to me. I can forward you the email with the link and the flyer. We will be talking about CBA. You'll be hearing from community board residents themselves, talking about the impact of Columbia's expansion on their neighborhood and on their communities. You'll also be hearing from this wonderful organization about the plan to privatize NYCHA, and particularly Manhattanville houses right across the street. You'll be hearing from other amazing food organizations and housing boards in the area to learn about the history and the housing predicament that we're in right now in West Harlem. My name is Brianna Sturkey. I'm a Barnard alum of 2020, and I'm not really proud to say that I graduated from that institution right now. So, as an alumni, as a concerned New Yorker, as a neighbor, as someone who's just visiting, please learn about the land that you're stepping on, learn about the people who are being impacted by this university and all the events that are going on. Thank you.
So just one last thing. We had a protest a few weeks ago, about a month ago, at Columbia on the Lowe's steps of NYCHA tenants, people from the community and Columbia students against Columbia's gentrification of Harlem. We had 5 demands. We still have these 5 demands, so I'm going to read them out. So for decades, Columbia University has been gentrifying Harlem, displacing entire communities in order to pave the way to further its corporate control of the neighborhood. We demand that Columbia, 1, pay for all necessary repairs at the NYCHA Manhattanville and Grant Houses projects, which are both right there. 2, use its enormous power and influence to stop the privatization of NYCHA, which is happening right now. The projects are all being privatized one after another. Eric Adams is pushing this through very quickly right now, and this threatens to make 500,000 people who live in NYCHA homeless. 3 is we demand that Columbia immediately cancel the class called Co-Designing Smart Cities. This is a collaboration to redesign Harlem, gentrify Harlem further, and set up even more surveillance. Number 4, we demand that Columbia renew the lease of the Red Balloon Preschool here without a rent increase. They said that they were going to evict the Red Balloon Learning Center next year with no explanation. And 5 is that Columbia give a raise to match inflation to all Columbia workers. With inflation now officially at 8.5%, the raises that the workers are getting at Columbia are actually pay cuts because they're all below 8.5%. So if you want to join us in fighting against Columbia's gentrification of Harlem, please talk to us. We have lots of information. If you want to join us in the fight against the privatization of NYCHA, we need people to join up. All right. Woo!
That's it? It's over?
That's it. I'm just going to take